Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And when you've been reading comics for as long as I have, you learn quickly how to manage your expectations when it comes to certain titles. At a certain point, you can usually tell from a distance whether someone put serious creative effort into a comic, or if it was just some shallow gimmick someone did for a paycheck. And throughout the history of comics, a lot of those shallow gimmicks came in the form of tie-ins to movies, TV shows, and video games. Now, that's not to say they were all terrible. Some were plenty fun, and a few even became popular in their own right, like Sonic the Hedgehog did with Archie Comics. But for the most part, you can't set your expectations too high with comics licensed from other media. Those books usually aren't made to tell a great story. They're made to sell movie tickets, video games, toys, and merchandise. And yet, despite all those complicating influences, it is possible to find a real gem within these tie-in comics. They don't come along often, but when they do, they're definitely worth highlighting. Enter Terminator Sector War, a 4-issue miniseries by Brian Wood and Jeff Stokely and published by Dark Horse under the Terminator license. This book, which came out in 2018, it was not at all affiliated with an upcoming movie or TV show, somehow found a way to be a damn good comic. Not just a great Terminator comic, a good comic in its own right. And for a franchise that has struggled to stay relevant for decades, no less. That's a hell of an achievement, as well as a much needed reminder of just how great a Terminator story can be when done right. Now, in terms of what makes Terminator Sector War such a gem, that's also somewhat remarkable. Because in terms of overall premise, it really didn't do anything too revolutionary for a Terminator story. It just took the concept from the 1984 movie, tweaked some details and themes, and built on that. Now that may not seem like a big deal, but given all the subpar Terminator sequels we've gotten since the late 90s, it genuinely feels refreshing. Now canonically speaking, Sector War takes place alongside the first Terminator movie. The events of that movie are the same, and this comic does nothing to change that. A T-800 Terminator Model 101 is sent back in time to Los Angeles to kill Sarah Connors, and Kyle Reese goes back to intercept. But this comic supplements all that by telling the story of another one of Skynet's targets, Lucy Castro. So, just like it did with Sarah, Skynet sends a T-800 to 1984 New York City. While this one doesn't look much like Arnold Schwarzenegger, his mission is still the same. Get some clothes, find some guns, and kill Lucy Castro. But who is Lucy? And what is her connection to Sarah, Skynet, and the future? Those are all relevant questions, and they're gradually explored over the course of the story. But the answers alone aren't what make this comic such a gem. In many respects, Lucy Castro is a lot like Sarah. At first, she's just a young woman trying to get by as best she can. That's not easy when she's a young cop for the NYPD and tasked with patrolling some of the worst parts of the city. It's also not easy in that she has an asshole boyfriend that she's trying very hard to break up with. And by most measures, her life is hardly enviable. Then, one night, and just as her shift is ending no less, she has to answer one last call. And that call happens to involve said asshole boyfriend. It's a lousy ending to a lousy day, and that's something we can all relate to. But then the Terminator shows up. And while we can't relate to that nearly as much, it does make for a thrilling ride from here on out. Like most other clashes involving time-traveling Terminators, things quickly get messy, and bloody, and dramatic. Now remember, Lucy is just a cop having a bad day. She has no idea what's going on or where this thing came from. And unlike Sarah Connor, there's no Kyle Reese or reprogrammed Terminator to help her. She's basically all on her own. But the stakes quickly rise for her when the Terminator reveals something major for Lucy. She's pregnant. And no, the father isn't from the future or the result of some time-traveling shenanigans. The father is actually the same asshole ex who found himself on the business end of the Terminator's wrath. But in this particular case, who the father of her child is doesn't matter. What matters is the role that child will play in the future. I won't spoil all the details. I'll just say that it makes Lucy's fight for survival that much more personal. Because she's not just fighting to save herself, she's fighting to save the child she's now carrying. And not having a protector like Sarah means she has to get a bit more creative when it comes to evading the Terminator. That even means breaking a few rules as an NYPD cop, something she's gone out of her way to avoid to this point. But that actually ends up being an important detail later on. Remember, this is 1984 New York. It wasn't exactly a good time to be a cop in New York City back then, even compared to today. The fact that Lucy is an honest cop in a city that's sorely lacking them says a lot about her. She's the kind of person you want training the future resistance to Skynet. And she's definitely the kind of person Skynet would want terminated as soon as possible. And over the course of 4 issues, it becomes a hell of a struggle. And the harder Lucy fights, the more you want to root for her. She's not the hardened badass that Sarah Connors became in Terminator 2, but she's not some clueless damsel who needs a protector either. She proves herself capable in her own right. Yes, she endures her share of bruises, scars, and setbacks. Yes, she finds herself in a difficult situation at the end, given the knowledge she now has. But that only makes her feel more real and relatable. It also makes her struggle to stop the Terminator a lot more dramatic. Because even if this model doesn't look like Schwarzenegger, he's still every bit as tenacious. Sure, he doesn't show much personality, even by Terminator standards, but he doesn't have to. A big part of what makes the Terminator so menacing is that they're cold, callous killing machines, immune to fear, hesitation, reservation, and remorse. Lucy Castro has to learn that the hard way. As a result, she has to fight that much harder to survive. For herself, for her unborn child, and for the future. That fight, more than anything, embodies the true spirit of Terminator. And it's a spirit this comic captures beautifully. If you happen to be a jaded Terminator fan, perpetually disappointed by all the subpar movie sequels, I highly recommend checking out this exceptional gem of a comic. I'll leave an Amazon Comixology link in the description. And while the fate of the Terminator franchise may be very uncertain at the moment, Terminator Sector War proves that there's still stories worth telling. And in that sense, it offers hope that there is indeed a better future worth pursuing. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more of my comic book gems. Until next time, take care and stay safe.